You know, the best part about editing a show is that we could be recording this intro before everything else, and you have no way to prove it. Did I forget the actual intro I wanted to start with? I guess the world will never know. Welcome to another bout of Backlog Brain Rot. Today we have a special episode all about Fire Emblem Engage. With me today is Straw Hat.
Konnichiwa, Mina-san.
And I'm Connor.
I know we talked about it a little bit on one of the main episodes, but I hadn't quite finished it. So I don't know what you guys thought. I thought I sounded a little more negative maybe than I anticipated on it because I ended up liking it more and more as we went on, which we'll talk about today. But just the game definitely gets better as you keep going.
Yes. And the first point I wanted to cover before we said anything else was a very, very important topic. And that is, what did you name the little creature that you found in the Somnium?
So usually my first playthroughs of games, I'm very boring. I usually just do the default name. So I just kept it as Sami.
You're the type of person who just named Cloud Cloud and Tifa Tifa, and Aerith was just Aerith, although Aerith is always Aerith.
Yep, exactly. The only time I change the name is if, well, like for the main character, I just name him after myself usually. Or like in Mass Effect, like when I play the game so many times, I just start creating like crazy named characters. So,
Yes, the world was just saved by Commander Ricto Alabob Shepard.
yeah, I think when like I named, when I did the female Shepherd playthrough, I named her, I had just watched Golden Time, I think, the anime. So I named
That's a
her,
good one.
I think Kokoro, or I can't remember what her name was now, but it was something like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I named him, I think, Jimmy Jim. Jimmy Jim the little dog, and man, I gave him those sunglasses and a black bandana, and he was balling.
That's so funny because I've been watching Kyle Bossman play it, and he did the same thing. He gave him the sunglasses and black bandana. I like the angry eyebrows too much, so that's what I gave him.
Oh, those ones are good too, but I just love the way that stupid little thing would follow you all the way across the map, but he couldn't match your speed. So you would sprint to the other side to go hurry up and grab all the stuff,
Yep.
and then pause to think about something or check a text. And then, whoop, there it is on the map icon, finally strolling up on you.
He also wanted to help you with your like strength training, which I never really needed any help, but it was nice that he was there.
I love just seeing the have him help, and then he just sit there and do absolutely nothing. Times
Yeah.
helped 0.
Zero, yeah.
He was helpful in the Wyvern game, though. He would shoot a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that game got stressful at times.
I think I kind of stopped doing any of the little mini games at the halfway point, though.
I know, me too, because it's like it was like, oh, I get these cool buffs, but then it's at one point I'm like, well, the main character really does not need any more buffs because he really wasn't the one giving me problems dying. It was other people. So
Yeah. I feel like I've buried the plot on whatever we should have opened with, but that was more important. So, yeah, Fire Emblem Engage, great game, just came out. I think I might like it more. It's like second or third favorite Fire Emblem at this time, but that's kind of early for me.
yeah, it's around that for me too. I would say it's probably third or fourth. We'll probably do a ranking after we play through all of them, but it's funny because like I had talked about in the episode, it reminds me a lot of Awakening and Fates both, which were the main 3DS games. It kind of takes like the best elements, I would say, from both of them because, well, best and worst, I guess, because I still don't really love the weapons not breaking.
And
But
we'll get to that.
yeah, but like the map structure is so much like Awakening. It's funny. And then just the story kind of reminds me more of Fates in a way. Or, yeah, Fates.
Yeah, I just finished Fates for the first time, and it's definitely balanced and designed in the same core principles, but
Hmm.
they also went back and brought a lot of the classic elements that I think they needed to make Fates work. Because Fates is kind of rough going back to it. Lots of cool ideas, but not executed great.
They really tried to capitalize on the coupling up, like with Awakening and with like the children and all that stuff, but they kind of went way overboard on it with Fates because they just saw how successful Awakening was, and they unfortunately kind of ran it into the ground because since then they've really stepped back from doing that. So
Yeah. And then Three Houses tried to simplify in a way that got a little too bland. Like
yeah.
they brought back a lot of classic elements, but they didn't really bring them back in a way that was very interesting. It still worked, but
Hmm.
there was a lot of things that they could have done but didn't.
Yeah, I feel like with Three Houses, it was much more of a focus on the story and characters as a whole, and just like they really wanted you to focus on the teaching aspect too, and like raising your characters. Where this game, and they also just kind of neglected the gameplay, like you said, they made it very simplified and not as much the focus. I feel like where this game, I feel like reversed that. They kind of went back to more the traditional Fire Emblem roots when it came to characters and story, and then just went all in on making sure the gameplay was better and up to snuff, which they definitely succeeded in that part.
Yeah. I think a big thing of it with Three Houses is that they gave you so much flexibility with the armies that you could design
Mm-hmm.
that they kind of didn't know what missions to create because they had no idea what you would have. Like I was sitting there with all the male all the male units were berserkers and all the female units were assassins. Balance.
Or you just let Lysithea go nuke and just kill everybody, because if you give her that special wand that lets her cast from 2 spaces away, good luck stopping her.
Yeah, although I think most after playing Path of Radiance, I think that kind of overpowered units industry or like they're a series staple.
Yep.
All right. So this story stuff, as far as this episode goes, I think we're gonna go ahead and say that spoilers are on the table. Does that sound good?
Oh yes, for sure.
Right. There's not a whole lot of story points I think we wanted to cover, but all the ones I did are near the end of the game. Because frankly, I think that's where all the interesting stuff in the story is. And it's
Mhm.
all kind of just fun, actiony Saturday morning anime before that.
Yeah, because I know the one thing, like the big, I guess we can get into one of the twists with the story, which was like when you, because you get a lot of your emblem rings at the beginning, and then is it chapter 10 and
Yeah.
11, going into 11, you actually lose all your emblem rings, and then you pretty much have to start collecting them again. Because I know at that point in the game, I was not challenged at all before,
No.
because it's like, I'm like, there's no way that this is going to get, like, if you have all these options with the emblem rings already, how are they going to challenge you? And that was the answer. They take them all away.
Yeah, I was kind of having the same concerns for the first 10 chapters where it started kind of hard. Like chapter 2, the tutorial, I managed to have a few units die on me. And I was like, okay, this is I can't, dead brain through this first chapter, but then that quickly kind of tapered off when they started giving you the rings and you suddenly had a burst of power and you're playing around with the fact that, oh, I can give Sigurd to Lewis, and now Lewis, the armored knight, can rocket
Mm-hmm.
across the field and is nearly invincible. I
Yep.
can't believe this game is balanced like this. And then they take it all away. They let you get used to it, learn how the mechanics work, and then they take the training wheels off.
Which was good because, yeah, otherwise I feel like the game would be way too easy. It is funny though, because I know you did not get the expansion pass, and I did, and you get two. You don't get rings, you get bracelets. You get two
Interesting.
different and those do not go away ever. So that does make it a little easier for you when you lose everything. And but other than that, yeah, I think it's pretty much the same. And I'm curious now because they added a bunch of new emblems, like how much the game would be balanced again, which I'm guessing, I wonder if you're not going to be able to do those paralogs till after that chapter, is my guess.
You probably can't do the paralogs, but even just having more of your team with the emblems, I feel like would detract from that training wheels off
Mm-hmm.
effect because I only had 2 emblems after that point, and I was already kind of having a little bit of a difficulty with some of the skirmish missions.
Right. Yeah, I'm curious because I bet you are top because we're going to talk at the end about our top 5 emblem rings, and I bet you because the DLC ones are pretty good, I'll tell you that. So we'll see what our rankings are. But it also made so because eventually you get too many, and then there's probably some that you really like that I'd ended up didn't even using because I'm like, eh.
Poor Roy.
Well, I actually did use him. I'll tell you what I used him for at the end. But yeah, his ring's kind of weak.
He's good if you have a big strength guy, but I didn't have anyone who synergized with him perfectly.
Yep.
But we'll get more into gameplay stuff later. As far as other story points go, I actually was rather fond of the villain by the end of it. What'd you think of him?
Yeah, I thought he was good because, especially at that very ending chapter, because he kind of tells you, like, obviously he's your typical, I'm evil, not really for evil's sake, but he's like, I just basically don't care about anybody except I want this emblem ring he had found before that. He really wanted to, I guess, he wanted to prove himself to that emblem ring because it was like the first one he found, and then he spent all this time searching through all the different worlds trying to find this one, and he was making kids and doing all these things, but he's like, I really don't care about any of you, it's all about this one thing.
Yeah, I thought it was thematically it was kind of interesting because they had the kind of sappier, cornier bit of the story was that it's very about family and
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know being in close family and caring for each other and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's why I like the villain so much is that he was a very real kind of terrible father, which is a
Mm-hmm.
pretty common trope for fantasy and sci-fi. But this one is just like, yeah, he's just straight up chasing glory or like
Yep.
obsession, and that's why he ends up doing all of these things. It's not because he wants to rule the world or any abstract thing. He's got this one very concrete obsession, and he's just let everything else get like burn in the pursuit of that. And
Yep.
it's a small thing. And otherwise, the story is kind of pretty just there, just fun, keeps its pace up. But
Yep,
that was cool.
exactly. Yeah, and typically what you've seen too in other than Three Houses, which fleshed out their villains way more than typical Fire Emblem games, they pretty much is just you fight like a dark dragon at the end. If you remember the old GBA games, there really is
Yep.
not much plot development. So I'm glad that they did make him at least give him somewhat of a motive rather than, oh, I just want to destroy and take over the world, which is typically the main Fire Emblem boss's motive.
Yeah. And then the 4 hounds that were kind of
Yes.
his underlings, I thought were great as well. You had the 2 that kind of end up turning to your side, and then they have the 2 that you actually have to kill at the end. And they had
Mhm.
that scene there with the 2 where that
Yep.
got to their backstories and motivations, and I thought it was a really well done scene.
I know. I was very impressed with the Four Hounds because that is once again another Fire Emblem tradition where like these four baddies come out. Because if you remember in the original Fire Emblem and GBA, and I think they do that in Sacred Stones as well, but they always have like these four bosses that just they're kind of like, hey, we're gonna we're gonna try to mess you up throughout the whole game, and then you always let them get away at the end, and because you have to fight them like 10 times throughout the game.
Oh yeah, I think of Path of Radiance. You had like the Black Knight, and then
Yep.
the there's like 3 other generals that you clash with through the whole course.
Yep. I don't remember what was the one who liked Vale. Was it what was I can't remember what his it's like the stoic knight type.
Mavier.
Yep. Which I knew he was gonna turn to your side. As soon as he was like entered the scene, I'm like, well, he seems because they're like, what do you want? He's like, I don't really want anything. Like, okay.
He's just like, yeah, I just wanna take care of my surrogate daughter figure.
Yep.
Like, all right.
And of course, the one of the major twists too is Vale like having this different side to her, which I knew it was veiled under the whole time under the cloak. Like it was pretty obvious, but I didn't realize she was have like a different personality. I just thought that she was just tricking you or something.
I actually didn't catch on to that very quickly. It didn't surprise me so much when it happened because I've played
Yeah.
uh, quite a few games recently with the theme of multiple personalities. It's kind of a weird timing on that. And in fact, half of the games I played in January had that at least.
Interesting. I was a very surprised one is that Mari dies. Like they kill her like outside of battle. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, that was a bit unexpected. And on that same point, I've actually kind of liked how they handled the protagonist's death and resurrection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was good. And the thing is, I had completely forgotten about the thing that because the emblem rings kind of talk at one point in the story about. I think it's probably before chapter 10, isn't it? Where they're like,
Yeah,
"Hey, we could do this one thing," and everybody, some of the emblem rings are like, "Well, we don't really know yet." And then, of course, by the time he dies, he or she dies, I've completely forgot that that was even an option, really.
yeah. I had remembered it given that the time span I beat the game was so much shorter. But it was, I thought it was the right amount of cost or like normally with the happier stories, there's a lot of, oh, and then magic happened, Deus Ex Machina, all the consequences are washed away and the best possible thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought there was a nice balance where it was still that kind of optimistic fun of the consequences, but there still were some to the fact that they were resurrected.
Yeah, yeah, I always do like when there's consequences, like you said, not just, oh yeah, it's all everything worked out great. There's no ill effects from this, and it's like, oh no, there's got to be something.
Yeah. The first part I liked though was like the fake out resurrection where she dies, or he, if you're playing male character, Alir dies the first time, and then she tells Vale, "Hey, why don't you just resurrect me as a zombie or the corrupted, as they're called?"
Hmm.
And she's like, "Wow, that doesn't sound great, but are you sure? Yeah, do it." So you get one mission where Alir comes back as a zombie and you kill all the things, and then she dies again.
Yep.
And everyone's like, oh, she's dead now because she corrupted herself to revive. And then it lasted 20 minutes. And then the emblems come in with
Hmm.
their true resurrection that turns her into an emblem as well. But then that also takes away emblems for the rest. Like, that's it. They all have to go away now when the war is over.
Yep. It reminds me of something else, which I won't discuss. You probably, I mean, it's something I don't even want to say because it's going to spoil something majorly. But it's a series that I love that also does something similar with that at some point.
Hmm. I guess I will find out someday.
But yeah, and the other thing I want we've kind of touched on it a bit is with the last two. Is it what are their names? Is it Sophia and
Uh,
I don't remember exactly their names now, but
what were they associated with?
is it Zelphia? It's the one of the last two hounds, like their last conversation
Oh,
they have.
yeah, that's that scene I was talking about at the end with them. I think it's
Right.
Zelfia, and then I can't remember the other guy,
It
but
starts with
Painboy,
like yeah, it starts with a G or something. But yeah, I really like
Reese.
when they're like he's like, "Why did you help them at the end?" And she's like, "What?" Because she acted like, "Oh, I just wanted to right my wrongs that I've made in this world." And he's like, "Yeah, right. That's not why you did that. Don't tell me that stuff." And then she's just like, "Yeah, I just really was mad because he didn't want to have a child with me, so that's what he gets." I'm like, "Whoa, I did not
Yeah,
get that."
I was surprised by that. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're capable of some really good character writing. Why
Hmm.
couldn't they do it this whole game?
I know.
Just love that line. I forgot what was it that she said? It was something like, I just don't like the fact that I'm dying here and he's still out there. It's like,
I know
oh,
that was great. I'm like that's the makings of a great villain there, because it's like, yeah, you're not. I'm glad she didn't like totally just be like, oh, I had to change a heart at the end. No, she did it out of selfish reasons, which makes it even better.
pure spite. Eddie would be proud. But it's funny that she told the party, oh, yeah, it's, I had to change the heart. You guys can do it. And nope, that was a lie. That was
And
awesome.
and the funny thing is, of course, they're all a bunch of suckers. They're like, oh yes, good always wins, and they didn't even question her.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was still some truth to it, but yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
love the nuance of that scene. Wish the rest of the game was like that.
I know that was definitely one of the shining moments in the story for sure.
Yeah. So I guess we'll bookend this section with the hair. Did the hair feel justified by the end?
It did. I did kind of feel bad for making fun of it the whole time, but because I'm like, oh, it makes so much sense because the blue hair is from the Divine Dragon, and of course, most main characters in Fire Emblem have blue hair of the lords, and then the red hairs because they were an actual child of the Dark Dragon, so that's why there's a mix and there's a changeover.
Yeah. That was kind of fun. And I loved seeing how it changed every time you engaged with a different emblem through the whole course of the
Mm-hmm.
game. And I personally, the Colgate Chan look grew on me even before the game came out. I was just like, yeah, I don't care if this looks kind of doofy. I love it.
It does fit the overall tone of the game, but it does still look really dumb, I will say, even though it did grow on me more by the end.
Perfectly understandable, but also rejected. Uh, all right. So for the gameplay side of things, this is where I really was really digging this game and where I probably have the most talking points, but they're also uh, could verge on me rambling for 2 hours or me forgetting all my little things I want to talk about. So let's go ahead and start with what were your tactical impressions of the game?
It's definitely the best Fire Emblem game gameplay wise. I feel like it's the perfect progression because, and I keep saying this, but just feel like going from three houses to engage gameplay wise is like Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z. Like just with, even though because I personally I do like Dragon Ball more than Dragon Ball Z, but the fights and the flash, of course, remind me of that because it's just everything gets pushed to 11 if you
Yeah,
compare the combat encounters in Three Houses and Engage. But the biggest thing for me is the break and combo mechanics that they add to the game change it so much because so if the weapon triangle's back and if
in
you
full
like,
force this
oh yeah,
time.
in full force, they actually expand on it with mages and tomes and everything else because they add martial artists. But if you break a weapon, then that enemy cannot attack for like one turn at least. And then so you could take a cheap shot at him pretty much with a weaker unit that would normally die if they would get attacked by one of those units. And then the other thing is the combos. So like units can, if they're close to each other, they'll just combo attack you. So even if you don't take damage from the main attacker, if a boss or somebody's like close by, they're gonna get to attack with that enemy. And those two things just change so much because this is probably the only Fire Emblem game where I was almost more worried about the regular enemies surrounding me than I was the bosses attacking, because the enemies, if they surround you, you get like 15 enemies, you're in trouble because they're just going to all attack one unit and they're just going to keep growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, the aggression of enemies in this game, including the bosses, was a complete change up. That to me, apart from any of the systems changes, the real change was the aggression of enemies. There is no static bosses in this game, or at least there's only one or two.
Mm-hmm.
In previous Fire Emblem games, you always had the thing of, okay, the safe way to play this level might not be the fast way, which Path of Radiance I have a point on later, but the safe way is always just pull the next wave of enemies into
Mm-hmm.
your thing and then kill those 3 or 4 enemies and progress your way across the map. And certain levels will shake that up a bit, so some are better than others, but a lot of levels, especially after replaying Fates and then playing Path of Radiance for a first time, a lot of levels do become that. Then you dogpile the boss at the end, and the boss
Mhm.
will sit there and stare at your 10 units getting ready to all pounce in like
Mhm.
one perfectly timed turn. In this one, that's not allowed to happen because you might start doing that and get one of the bosses, and then every other boss on the map will suddenly get triggered and go, haha, it's time to swarm them now. And so all the enemies that you were dancing around all go on you at once. You have to be much smarter.
That reminds me of chapter 17, where you have like 5 bosses roaming the map just seeking you out. And plus you
Yes.
have 5 bosses, you have dragons, and you have other units too. And it's just like if you try to take it easy, they're gonna surround you anyway, and it's gonna be bad.
Yeah, you have to be a lot more dynamic with how you're moving around the map, and I love it. I love having the bosses actually engaged in the
Mhm.
tactics.
I will say too, one thing this would have made it even harder because the one thing that's nice is that reinforcements cannot act on the same turn they arrive, because that was not the case in Three Houses. And in my maddening playthrough, I got destroyed so many times because I had units back further. Reinforcements would come behind them and instantly kill them the next turn.
Yeah, I'm glad it's not that way. Fates wasn't like that either, and neither was Path of Radiance. So that was a weird kind of difference in Three Houses, which is kind of cheap because it's like, okay, first time I'm doing this, I'm never going to know where the reinforcements are coming from. So why
Yep.
would you do that to me?
And
Although
plus,
the rewind mechanic made it.
yeah, the rewinds were a lot more limited when you started out in Three Houses. Like you got more as you went on. Where here you just got a set amount. I don't know if Maddening's any different, but because you get 10 in hard, and I guess in
Yeah.
normal you get unlimited, which I'm like, whoa, that's crazy.
Oh, so that might make maddening even more difficult with like 5 for whatever they do.
I think it's still just 10 from what I heard. I think it's the same.
Oh, interesting. Hmm.
But also another thing that's big for this game is it lets you save every turn, which or whenever you want, really. Where other Fire Emblem games do not let you do that at all.
Yeah, and even on hard, I never actually felt compelled to do that. So it sounds like it would be a easy way to cheese, but I felt like it was balanced well enough that I'll probably end up doing that on maddening. But otherwise, eh, good time saving
Yeah.
thing.
See, I'm addicted to saving, so if the option's there, I'm gonna save as much as I can. So, but yeah, I mean, I still died a few times and had to reload the whole or retry the whole mission. Mostly skirmishes, but it still happened.
Oh gosh, you should see me trying to go through Path of Radiance and Fates with the emulator with save states, and I am constantly save stating in those games because he, without the lack of in-game rewind, you waste so much time if you make one little mistake. Oop, you instead restart the whole level.
I know. I know the rewind. I'm glad they're finding ways ever since. I guess it was Three Houses the first one. I feel like there
Three
was
Houses
other.
was the first one with the rewinding.
Yeah, because since then I feel like it's hard to not have that. But yeah, Awakening and Fates did not have it. And like you said, you because a lot of times you forget about a unit or something and then they get killed and it's like, oh, why did I forget about them?
Or you literally just accidentally misinput something instead of pairing up the unit, it gets left behind and heals the dude. Or whoops, I accidentally tanked with an axe instead of a lance. It's like,
Yeah. I had that happen a couple times too, where I wanted to heal somebody else, and then it defaulted to a different person who had like 1 health. I'm like, yes, I wanted to heal them over the one that's basically dead. Thanks, game. Good thing that I
yeah,
have to waste a rewind, but still.
that happened all the time where it's was auto target the guy with the most health instead of the least health. That was a
Yeah,
little weird.
I know.
Yeah. But going back to the earlier point on what was it? The oh, let's see. You mentioned the breaking and then
Oh, like
the
team ups.
the team ups. Right, that was it. So that's one of the things I liked from Fates, which was introduced in the Awakening era of the series, which is, yes, if your units are next to each other, they'll participate with each other in battles. Well, that's really cool.
Hmm.
But one thing I got tired of, and particularly after putting like 100 hours in the Three Houses, was everything became about making these Death Star groups of units that would slowly march across the map to maximize their
Mm-hmm.
defensive and offensive stats by doing all the support stuff together. Here, I like the change where they had specific backup units. So only certain units could participate in combat in that way. And they didn't have to be adjacent to the person they were helping. They had to be adjacent to the enemy being targeted, which was great. In fact, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't even have to be adjacent. It's just in range with one of their weapons.
Yeah, that was, I know, the big problem in Awakening. I don't remember if Fates has it too, but the pair up mechanic was like one of the new things in Awakening where you basically combine two units into one. And the thing, it was, you pretty much had to do that in the harder playthroughs to be able to survive. But the only thing I didn't like about it was you pretty much removed one of the units. Like you would never see them really do anything because they're just paired to
Yeah.
the other unit. So I was glad that this was definitely a lot better because it worked good for Awakening, but I'm glad they really didn't stick with it after that.
Yeah. Fates did it in an interesting way. Well, I thought better than I remember from Awakening, but it could just be bad memories because it was a long time ago. Where Fates had it either you pair up for more of a defensive passive bonus, or you just have them adjacent and they'll participate with each other to do more damage.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but everything revolved around that at that point, so it was a little more limited in movement. Whereas here, I felt very content having some units operate entirely solo and just moving units all over the map where I'd have like Clara's ICBMing that unit way over there and then doing all these hit and run tactics with that. And then when I was in an actual engagement, maybe in like the center of the map, my units weren't necessarily next to each other. They were more precisely blocking off and controlling the zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know for me, like, I would forget about it too because it doesn't always figure. I don't even know if it does at all figure in your initial damage when you attack the unit. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Usually Botron or Lapis would like jump in and do some damage and like either get the kill or add much needed damage. I'll be like, oh yeah, why didn't it add that in the figures? I would have remembered to. I wouldn't have been so scared to attack.
Yeah, it was there. I think if you had like simple menus, it might have been a little hard to see. I always, for whatever reason, I'd see it and just not process what it was until like halfway through the game.
Maybe that's what I maybe I just didn't I would forget about it every single time for
Yeah,
sure. Like I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that that's a thing."
yeah. I think part of it is that in Fates, your supporting unit would do like full damage when they did that.
Mhm.
This one, there's like a cap damage, and it seems to be based more on the attacking unit than the supporters. So there was a lot more limiting with that, which worked great in encouraging it to happen when you needed that little extra, but it also avoided the situation where you would go to attack an enemy and they're all in their own Death Star, and so they all murder you because they're all
Mhm.
getting full damage.
Yeah, because there's a lot of times where like especially like a knight like Lewis or oh, what was her name? The other knight would like they would barely take any damage from just like an initial attack, but then when they combo with a archer or something, they're doing like 7 damage. It's like, "What?"
Yeah. So I really like that. And then the other little change that made a big difference for me was the base movement speed was 4 tiles in this one, which is down from Fates where it was like 5, and even down from Path of Radiance where it was like 6.
Oh, see, I didn't even catch that because I hadn't played them. What about Three Houses? What do you remember what that was?
I think Three Houses was 5 as well, although I do remember that one starting pretty low on the base movement speed as well. But that
Mhm.
difference from 5 to 4, I think, is really significant because if you think of it in terms of like the math, now if you have a lineup of even 3 units in an open field, they are pretty well defended from being wrapped around by a lot of units
Yep.
because they just can't make the speed to get all the way around. So now you have the ability to defend a group of squishies behind the front line with only 3 units.
Speaking of that too, that reminds me of another new feature they added, which is chain guards, which is such a clutch thing because
Yes.
basically a couple or the healers are basically martial artists at this point, unless they're just a straight up mage.
Yeah, they can spec in the priest, but
Yeah,
otherwise.
they have this ability called chain guard, which they can basically, if you form around them, like all you could do 4 units or just one if you want. They will take the damage of one attack for your unit, which if they have full health, which comes in clutch a lot of times because it's like, well, I want this unit to get attacked, but they're gonna die if they take more than one hit, and that's where the chain guard comes in. So John and Fran, I think's her name, are the main two that could do that.
Yeah, those are the ones you have from the start early on that can do it. And I liked how it wasn't because they could only take the one hit because it disables once your martial artist is
Mm-hmm.
less than max health. So you had to be tactical about it. It was super useful when you could do it, but it wasn't so freely available that you were basing all of your strategies on it.
Right, because they take damage from the chain guard. Like they don't necessarily take the full damage, but they take a little bit, which means they can't do it again next turn unless you heal them.
Yeah. And that just kind of gets into another point that I really liked is how much variance there was with your tactical options, but none of them felt like they were game defining, whereas I had to base all my strategies on this. Like with the break, okay, that's very important in a lot of scenarios, but there were also a lot of scenarios where I either just had to make do with being on the disadvantage or where I could effectively work my way around it if I did a different strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it has the classic Fire Emblem thing of you don't know what type of units you're going to face in each battle. So there's going to be times where you're not going to have the right units to counter the certain units. So you're just going to have to keep getting broken and hope you don't die
Yeah.
and can counter it. Because, I mean, Alir got broken a bunch, my knights. I mean, it's just, it happens if you don't have the right. Because usually what I like to do is split my party into two, if I can, two groups, and then head off.
That tends to happen because of the map's designed in a way where there's only so many units that can flow through certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
And then conversely, you would end up with scenarios where the break mechanic was what, like you didn't necessarily plan for it ahead of time, but the break mechanic was the difference between succeeding in a certain engagement and failing. And I liked that interplay where it was not always the most important thing, but it was always an option that you thought about.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you break too much from their traditional classes and builds compared to? Because I know, like, in some Fire Emblem games, I like to experiment. But, like, for this one, I pretty much just kept everybody the same because I didn't really understand all the systems. But obviously, if I do Maddening playthrough, I'm going to have to mid max probably to survive. But I know
Yeah.
some people love to just, like, be like, oh, no, you know what? I'm going to make this person a completely different class than they were intended to be, which can work. But did you stray from that at all, or did you pretty much just let everybody traditionally progress?
I let everyone just be the classes they were because I was interested to see how they all played out. And then once the emblems were added into the mix, I didn't know what to expect anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel the need to reclass anyone because if I wanted to give them a new defining characteristic for their build, I just pair them with certain emblem ring, and now I basically have created a new class.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it's funny because sometimes the emblem rings are introduced with characters that are not a match for them at all. Like with like it's like this, like even take Yunaka for example. I really
Yes.
don't you really don't want to put Makaya's ring on Yunaka, but that's how it gets introduced, which is funny. It's kind of the same with Diamant and Roy. Like I did not want I wanted Ike on Diamant instead of Roy, so I did not really use Roy that much on him.
Yeah, I had a few funny pairings, but we'll get to that when we go over our final unit lists. I think the only other gameplay thing I had a particular point on was the weapon breaking or
Yes.
lack thereof here. This is a thing that you've mentioned several times as being a pain point for you, but I have to say I quite liked it because it lets them highlight the stat differences between each weapon class more. So I was actually not even really using silver weapons because I had a team of very lightweight units and they
Mhm.
didn't have the build stat to use silver weapons effectively with their speed. So I either got one decent heavy hit with a silver weapon or I could get two good hits with like an iron or steel
Iron.
weapon.
Yeah, because it's funny because traditionally iron and silver are about the same weight in Fire Emblem games. At least that's what I thought. But when you had said that before, I'm like, you know what? I didn't even try it because I just assumed that that was the case. But I think
Yeah.
they did like the weapon. They've only done it in one other game, which is Fates, and I think they did a way better job in this game because actually customizing your weapons was so huge in this game because you can make some super strong weapons that you can use like the whole game. Where I don't remember quite that well in Fates. Maybe you do since you just played it, but I feel like they just didn't really do it or do the weapons as well in Fates for some reason.
In Fates, they tried too many things at the same time, and none of them felt tuned very well. Where you had a lot of weapons in Fates, way more than I remembered, and they all had those more drastic cost benefits to all of them. Like steel weapons had reduced speed on follow up attacks, silver weapons would reduce your stats on the after you attacked with them. The iron weapons were like the baseline.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a bunch of other gimmick weapons after that. But
Yeah.
for me, there, one, the upgrading system was too obtuse to be useful, where I wasn't really upgrading anything by the end and didn't need to. And then all the other stats I kind of just ignored because there was too much to think about. And
Mm-hmm.
that's coming from a guy who spent like 5 hours optimizing my builds in Engage because Engage had a great economy that go
Mm-hmm.
with a just complex enough weapon system.
That is another good point because I feel like this was definitely one of the Fire Emblem games where I just didn't have unlimited money to do everything. I feel like most games, especially if you're doing skirmishes and paralogs, you're just like rolling in cash by the end and you could just buy whatever you want.
Yeah.
Where since they introduced that where you can donate money to the kingdom, if you do that, then it's going to take tons of money and then you're not going to be able to afford all your weapons all the time.
Yeah, and the cost benefit there is if you don't donate the kingdoms, then all the skirmishes give you pathetic rewards.
Yep.
And then I thought that economy problem was strictly a post awakening issue with the series. But turns out Path Radiance has the exact same problem where I ended up with so much money I could not spend it in fast enough. I was making custom weapons and realizing I could only make one custom super weapon per chapter, and there's only like 30 chapters, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need them half the time. So I was just sitting there on like 10,000, 100,000 gold or whatever at the end. I was like, okay.
Yep, exactly.
Here I was starved. I could not get enough money for anything.
And then every time I would think I'd have enough, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to upgrade everybody's weapons. And then I'm like, oh, I have no money left.
Yeah, I will upgrade one or two weapons, whatever will make the biggest difference for the next chapter. And that was
Mm-hmm.
great. All right. I think, do you have any other points on the gameplay? Otherwise, I think we should probably move on.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I mean, we both said we adore it, and I'm sure. I hope they keep similar or to the in the next Fire Emblem game, or they could change something else because a lot of things that got introduced here I never would have thought of that I needed, but now I want it more. So,
Right. I'm very much looking forward to this. I mean, I always like the series, but now I'm extra interested to see where it goes. So let's do a brief thing on the maps and missions we liked. There was a certain infamous chapter I believe you wanted to mention.
oh yeah, I'm gonna tell you guys about my woes with Chapter 17, which was really the only story chapter that gave me trouble. And the reason it is because it's kind of like it's the chapter which I mentioned before. You have 5 super bosses on the map, and they're slowly or quickly moving towards you. So this was one of the times I actually had to restart
Yeah.
because I was not expecting to get to have so many of the bosses to move toward me, and I just couldn't do anything.
Well, it starts out innocently enough. You
Mm-hmm.
see 5 bosses on the map. They're all in their different zones, and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go traverse the zones and take on all these bosses. And then they start moving.
Yep. Yeah, so originally I had sent a squad the whole way up to the right hand corner, and they were going to work their way to the middle, and I was going to send the other squad around the left side and bring everybody up to the top corner, which is where 2 of the super bosses are, Vale and
Yep.
but then, of course, what happens is everybody starts coming towards you, and my team on the right was fine, but then my left-handed team could not deal with all the super bosses because I think I had 3 of them coming at me at once. Plus, you have a dragon in the middle.
Yeah, you and I did the exact same thing. And those dragons now,
Ugh.
unlike 3 houses where they were kind of bosses of their own, now they're basically moving artillery, but they
Yep.
aren't super tough on their own because they move the multi health bar mechanic to the bosses instead.
Yep. Which is a game changer because you can't just one shot a boss and be good. They're going to come back again. So
Yeah,
you got to consider that.
bosses are way more intimidating in this game for
Mhm.
just so many reasons, and I loved it because
Me
it was
too.
just manageable enough, but now they were the most threatening thing on the map.
Yeah, so what I ended up doing with that map is I pretty much tried to lure everybody from the right side down towards the middle, and then I moved my left-handed team more towards the middle, but it was kind of a pain to move through the middle because you had like the fires burning, which limits your movement, and you had like a wall there.
Yeah.
So I think I ended up getting 2 or 3 units across and dealing with the dragon. And then I started moving, and I'd finished the right side. So I was moving everybody to the middle, but then the units just all descended on me. And I ended up being surrounded by both sides. And for a while, I could not figure out how to do that. I'm like, I'm going to have to restart. It was funny because I stopped playing for the day, and the whole night I was thinking about how can I get out of this? How I can't deal with
Yep.
this because there's too many units, and I can't deal with the bosses. Because actually, you had 6 bosses because you had
Yep.
the revived king from of Ivy's dad,
Yeah, 3 of
and
them were at the very top, 2 in
yep.
the bottom left, well, 1 in the middle left, 1 in the bottom left, and 1 in the top right.
So how I ended up getting out of it is what's her name? The axe wield, the general forehound Muriel or something,
Yeah, something
or
like that.
Mari. I think it's
Mari.
Mari. But I was so scared of her, which I really didn't need to be because she's probably the least threatening of all the bosses. So
Javier was the threatening one for me.
yeah, I know. So pretty because I had tried to deal with everybody else, but then near the bottom they'd come up and get me. So how I did it is I just kept slowly pulling people back while keeping my strong units to take the brunt of the hits up front, and then I took Mari out and her units, and then I was able to get enough momentum to get up and do it. But what's her? One of the units I kept getting killed by the magic users, the goth axe girl, because she's really strong, but she has no
Oh yeah, her.
resistance. So, but I had to do so many different movements, and when I finally got it, I was like, okay, that was pretty awesome. But it was very stressful. If the rest of the game's like this, I'm gonna be having gray hair or it's falling out. But thankfully, there's really not that many more challenging chapters compared to this. I feel like.
Yeah, although there are a lot of exciting chapters
Oh
still,
yeah,
but
the
I
last one was good. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say it's funny that you stuck with the bottom half of the map strategy for the chapter 17 cuz I went even harder on my original plan and decided, you know what? If they're going to rush me on the bottom side of the map, I'm going to rush the top side of the map. So
Mm-hmm.
I abandoned the bottom left corner, went everyone on the right, and flooded into after taking out Grease, I flooded into the dragon zone, took him out, and then started skirmishing people there. And there was a patch of woods that
Mm-hmm.
I based my strategy in and just met that top group head on and just tried to stick it out while then Mavier and the other chick then slowly came up to
Mm-hmm.
meet me.
Yeah, that's funny because I did it. That middle ground is where I ended up too, but I think I was down more before I could finally move up and take over it. So I really never even went to any of the top of the map at all. Like everything happened in that middle grass area for me.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that, you know, It's always good in a tactics game that multiple people are coming up with different strategies
Yeah,
to
different
solve it.
strategies. Yeah, that was like I said, other than the last chapter, which we can talk about at the end, was fun because just it was just like a mad rush to try to do as much damage as possible to the main dragon. But yeah, other
Yeah.
than that, of course, there's the infamous. I saw Ryochi really did not like the map with the winds that would blow you back.
Oh, the avalanches.
Yeah.
Loved that. That was so funny to me.
Well, it's funny, like it was kind of annoying for me at times, but it's because I kept forgetting which turn that it would actually blow. Because I'd be like, "All right, I still have another turn before it does it," and then nope, it was that turn, and I did that a few times. I'm like, "All right, I need to start paying attention to how many turns it tells me."
Yeah. I'm pretty sure if you had the enemy attack zones on, it would just show you. Like if you saw the entire lane highlighted, then you need
Hmm.
to get out of the lane or
Yeah,
find cover.
yeah. See, I figured that out, but it was near the end, so I had it a couple times where it blew my units back. I'm just like, ugh. But I pretty much kept all my units in their three spaces. The only at the end, of course, I had them all converge to the middle, and there was only a couple units. I think I had one that was stranded up top and one at the bottom, but the rest of them I did manage to bring to the
Yeah.
middle to deal with fake Alir.
Yeah. So other than that, I thought a lot of the missions in the last half of the game were really cool. My favorite was chapter 13, the shipping yard.
Is that the one I'm trying to remember? Are you
So
on the ship or?
no, it's you're in the desert area still, and
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah,
the one
yeah.
where you get Tamara.
Yep, I remember that one. Yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah, you have this maze of buildings and breakable crates, and the map is dark, and you have these flyers coming in, and you have a little bit of a roaming boss thing, and your party is broken up, well, to
Hmm.
start. So you are having all these elements at play at once, but none of them ever got to the point of being like painfully hard to deal with. So
Hmm.
it just was a lot of layers interacting and just enjoyable and thematic.
Did you do the same thing as me and try to split up the party in the beginning and then you go down and be like, oh, you can't go down to the right side. You have to go everybody around the left side down and then go over to the middle if you want to go to where the bosses are.
I actually left them separate until I got to the boss, but I had a general sense of where the boss was, so I kind of swept in uh, I kind of swept through everything else with my two. Well, it started as three groups, but then I became two, and then eventually
Right.
while also dealing with the flyers. So I always had some people who were like up on the shore, getting
Okay.
silly behind dealing with the flyers. Other, oh,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's all I really had to say about that. I was going to bring up a few of the paralogs unless you wanted to talk more about the story missions.
I was just going to mention one other funny one, which was the one where you take on Greece in the temple again. You come back, it's now dark, and you play hide and seek with him with a boss that teleports
Oh
and
yeah.
comes at you from random spots, well, semi random spots in the darkness. That was just also another very thematic gimmick that made it another memorable map. And there was a lot of moments like that in this game.
Yeah, that was good. And I guess we can talk about the final mission now because
Yeah.
that of course you fight the main boss and he has 3 health bars and I think the last two he has 100 health.
Yeah.
And I just like I got lucky because I only had to use one character to kill the last general before the barrier freed up, so I could use the rest of my characters to do damage, and I did it all in one turn. But I had to do it a couple different tries because one time I just was short like 10 damage. And I'm like, I don't want to do the whole cycle again. I'm gonna rewind because you only have one turn once his shield's down to inflict damage, or he's gonna get the barrier back up again.
Yeah, and anyone who's still behind in his damage zone, once that barrier's up, you're going to end up with dead units. So if
Yeah.
you wanted to do a no deaths playthrough, you had to kill him in one turn.
Yeah, which I did manage to do no deaths. There was a couple times where I'm
Same.
like, well, I don't really use this character. I could just let them die, but I'm like, no, I gotta keep them alive.
Can't do it. Gotta keep him alive. That was really fun because it felt like all the work I had done to build up my core party had
Mm-hmm.
meant something because I was also like right at that point where I was having to rewind to make up that last like 10 damage. I
Yep.
was surprised I even got there, and everyone had to work together on that last rush.
Yeah, so I didn't. I usually will try to use all my units until near the end, which I think I waited till like chapter 20 or so, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna pick my army, and this is who I'm going with. But were there any paralogs that stuck out to you? I know for me, Lynn's paralog was pretty tough because Lynn will snipe
Yeah,
you from clear across the map, and she'll pick on the weak units too, and I'm like, ah,
that one was a standout for me because it was just so nostalgic as well because those
yep.
planes were where I started my Fire Emblem experience. So that was a great one.
BioLS was cool too because you had the music from Three Houses, which I loved, and you pretty much just had to defend gems, which threw me off so many times because I'm like, oh no, this unit's gonna kill me next turn. They just go up and destroy something. I'm like, phew.
Yeah. I thought Erica's was cool looking.
That was a good one. Roy's was way harder than I thought. Like when I first started Roy's, I'm like, this is gonna be so easy, but I struggled with that one because I split my two units up and you almost can't handle it. Like because you get those flyer reinforcements all the time.
yeah. It was kind of funny with the paralogs, and it kind of made me realize, oh, I really like what they're doing now, and putting these old missions in with some small updates made me go, I really think that we are in a better place now with the mission design, even compared to the classics.
I know because you probably caught it after since you played Path of Radiance later, but that Ike mission brought me back so much nostalgia because I'm like, this is just like really that first mission in Path of Radiance where you're kind of on your own. You have to defend the house and you have to
Yeah,
split your units into kind of like three different unit areas.
I think that actually might have been the standout for me of the Engage paralogs, because I hadn't played Path of Radiance.
Hmm.
But I feel like I got an even stronger impression in Engage than when I went and played Path of Radiance, because although thematically I liked it more in Path of Radiance, but there's a section in Engage where they shatter the giant rock
Oh
in the
yeah.
middle of the map, and you're just like, oh no, that entire section is off open.
Yep, and I know I really like Micaiah's, which we have both haven't played Radiant Dawn yet, but that was such a good map because I was like intimidated because you got to balance. The units are trying to come to your area, but you also have to be moving some units to Micaiah to deal with her because she's not going to move unless you're getting close.
Yeah, that was funny one because I again played full offense. I don't think a single one of the enemy units broke past the first wall.
Yeah, mine didn't either, but because I had to. I knew Micaiah wasn't going to be that hard to deal with either, so because I knew she wasn't going to be that strong since she's more of like the healer class. But yeah, I think the one I finished the quickest was Celica's because she like teleported to me, and I'm like, "You're gonna die next turn," because she attacked a unit that was not even weak to her, and I'm like, "Well, I finished it in like 5 turns," which was funny.
Yes, some of those ended up being really short.
How did you handle Morse? Because I basically sent four of my strongest units to deal with him and his crew, and I sent everybody else to try and get the treasure. But by the time Marth started attacking me, I had to I didn't really get most of the treasure. Really wasn't even worth getting. But a lot of those units on the side were so tough; they were stronger than Marth.
That was the beach one, right?
It's not a beach. It's like that's Celica's, I think. The
Oh,
beach one is or this one's like you go into this castle and it splits into two sides. There's like a gate with Marth and like 8 units behind
oh,
the
that one.
gate. And then the other side has like 20 units, but you have like or four treasure chests there.
Yeah, okay, I remember that one now. I ignored Marth. The like, I just had everyone over to the treasure,
Oh,
and then
that's funny.
eventually Marth was like, "Oh, I feel ignored," and so they came out to meet me, and then we fought.
That's so funny because yeah, that's like the complete opposite of what I did. It made probably so the map it took me less time to complete it, but I just didn't get as much experience or rewards out of it, I would say.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think other than that, that's probably pretty good on. But yeah, that's some great maps. I can't wait. I'm excited to play those DLC paralogs whenever I play it again because I'm sure they're going to be really good.
yeah, that will be a fun part. I kind of forget that we'll have those missions even with just the character packs, probably.
Yep.
So that's cool. Look forward to that. All right, then. So now we're going to get into a few of our top lists uh, and just generally the thing. Well, we're going to go over the top 5 emblems we like, and then we're going to talk about our final parties and the strategies we had there. And then we'll finish off with our top 5 waifus, the classic topic. So, do you want to just go all 5 and then, or do you want to like switch back and forth for the emblems?
I like the switch back and forth.
All right, I'll go ahead and start with my number 1 then, which was kind of a given for me considering my history of the series of starting with Blazing Blade back when I was like 6 or 7. So my number 1 is Lyn.
Interesting. Lens is really good because not only do you get the snipe from any area you want for the most part, I mean, it is limited, but the shadow clones are clutch because most
They're
of the time,
so good.
yeah, the enemies go for them. And then even if they don't hit them, they'll combo with you. So,
Yeah, her kit is insane for my kind of play style. She has incredible offense, gives you so many offensive options, and it has a defensive option that isn't just tanking, which is perfect for all of my critical hitting dodge units, as we'll see when we see my final party. Also, it's Lyn. She's great.
Lynn is great. So my number 1 is, I think it's the most, it's kind of like a boring number 1 pick, but it's the one that saved me so many times and was just come in the clutch, and that's Byleth with his dance. The dance is
Oh,
just so
yeah.
clutch.
Yeah, he was really effective.
Yeah, because basically what it does is, so if you, his main ability is you surround the dancer or whoever is equipped with him in 4 squares, and then those people get to go again, which is so clutch for you because you basically can get your best units to go, your 4 best units to go twice in one turn, which saved me many times.
Yeah, the amount of repositioning and just general action economy advantage there is massive. I also, though, really liked putting him on a mage because then the mage could get 2 extra squares of range from all of their spells, and that
Mm-hmm.
was pretty intense for when you need to snipe at something that was in well entrenched position.
Yeah, they really went into the teaching aspect because you also could like boost your resistance, I think, around him for if you wanted to, right? Wasn't that an
Yeah,
option?
I think it was based on whatever class you paired him with. He would be able to buff a stat in a 2 square range uh, for everyone around him. I actually almost never ended up using that though because I was already using him as kind of a artillery slash dancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because I like never, I really didn't attack with him very much whenever they were equipped with his ring. It was mainly just I'd save it for the dancing ability because it was so strong to do 4 units again.
Yeah, and that again kind of highlights what I really liked about how they implement the emblems is that there was that kind of flexibility. Is I had him as an off artillery and you had him as a heavy support.
Mm-hmm.
On that, my next pick is Sigurd, which I didn't expect because I didn't know. I don't have any history with the character, being that he's from, was it the second game in the series?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so none of those were translated yet. Oh, wait. I think he might be the third game. I think
Oh yeah,
Celica
yeah,
is the
you're right.
second.
Yeah, Alm and Celica are the second one. Yeah, the third game we never got, and
Yeah,
the fourth game we never got, which is Leafs, I think. So.
yeah. But wow, Sigurd was the first one that made me go, geez, these can be powerful because he gives you a unit, was it 2 extra squares of movement in a
Mhm.
low movement game? So that is an insane amount of boost, like 50% extra movement.
I know, and I kind of took it for granted at the beginning because I'm just like, oh, Alfred, because I equipped him to Alfred at first too, when I first got him, and I'm like, oh, he just can move 2 spaces after each turn, but I'm like, no, I guess he can't. And then, like you said, with Louis and some of like those lower movement units, he's just so clutch. And I also saw one thing I definitely want to do in my next playthrough is I'm going to give a lot of people his ability Cantor.
Yep. Which is what I was going to mention next, is that they also use these emblems as a way to introduce old mechanics in a limited fashion. So they didn't have to be these global rules, because it used in certain games in the series. I don't remember if Three Houses was like this. I know Fates doesn't, but Path of Radiance does. Is mounted units could move again up to the end of their unspent movement after their attack. And that really changes a lot of strategies in terms of the overall flow. But by making canter on specific units, it creates kind of a more interesting dynamic.
Yeah, because essentially, because you end up getting limited how many units can attack one specific unit at once, because once you surround them in certain ways, you can't attack anymore. But with Cantor, you can move people out of the way, and then you could just do more damage and team people up. Because another thing you could do is add, I don't remember who has it, but the ability to turn your unit basically into Lapis or Boucheron and attack again. I think that's an ability from one of the emblems too I saw, which would also be clutch.
Yeah, I don't quite remember that one. But what was your number two?
So my number two is one of the DLC ones. So you did not get this one, I believe, but it is
Tiki?
Tiki. Tiki is a really great emblem because basically whoever equips it turns into a dragon.
Oh, dope.
And her main ability is that you can grant a unit a revive, which is so clutch and will be very clutch and maddening, I can imagine, because
Jeez.
like the more you level it up, the more like you restore their health as well. So it's just I did that for a lot of my units because then you can pick one unit. I did test this out though. You can only do one unit at a time. You can't do multiple people with resurrect, which would be even more OP. But you get tons of defense with the dragon, of course, ability, and you get some attacks that the biggest clutch attack I would do is whoever has it equipped gets like a breath attack, and you basically will hit the unit in front and three squares behind you, which will make so the enemy can't move and it'll damage everybody. So yeah, Tiki, very powerful emblem.
Dang. I am actually pretty glad that I played the base game without any of the DLC, just so I could get a feel for how that is, and then I'll be able to compare when I play
Mm-hmm.
all the DLC and do maddening.
Yeah, that'll be good because yeah, those ones definitely did help me because the other one is going to be on this list too a little further down because it's also really good. So, but
Yeah.
it's not my number 3. So, what's your number 3?
I went with Ike, which is kind of fun because he's a character that I grew to like because of Smash Bros. And I only played Path of Radiance after playing this game. And part of it was because I enjoyed Ike and what's her name from the next game?
Micaiah?
Micaiah. I enjoyed them quite a lot in this game. So that really spurred me into trying Path of Radiance finally.
Yeah, Ike's is really good because he's basically your tank character, and he gets that attack that I can't. Is it just called Blaze? What's it
Great
called?
Ether.
Great Aether, yeah, because that you basically cannot take or you can't do damage for a whole turn, and then everybody does damage to you, and then everybody in that a certain radius will get the damage the next turn, which feels so satisfying to do.
Yeah, especially when it's that increased defense and resistance buff that it
Yep.
can gives your characters so they can survive all that damage. It's got 2 range in a full radius, so that's massive if you just like send them off into the middle, whatever unit has them off into the middle of a group that you just barely survive. And it comes with a healing afterwards based on who you damage.
Yes, yeah, it's such a good. I was happy that he was probably the best Lord. Well, Sigurd was really good too, like you said, but he was a really good Lord Emblem Ring, and just made so because I would often put him on the tanks or Diamant is what I would do usually.
Yeah, Diamant probably would have been a really good pairing, but I put him on Anna, which
That's a
I'll
funnier
explain
one.
later.
That is a funny one.
So who's your number third?
Well, that
Number
goes right
3.
into number 3 for me is Micaiah's emblem ring, because talk about clutch healing. The
Oh
Great
yeah.
Sacrifice is one of the best moves in the game, not only for SP growth, because you get a ton of SP after using it, but it lets you heal every unit, no matter where they are on the map, back to full health, but you only have 1 health yourself after that.
Yeah, it's basically the only safe way to use it is to make sure your healer is not going to
Yeah.
be threatened or is a dragon, because dragons will get 30% health afterwards.
Right. And then you do get that ability that you get health back when you heal, which is also another clutch skill that you should give all your healers, because it is annoying when you're like your healer just has, if they level up or something and they have 1 health that needs healed, so they can't do chain guard, but they get it
Yeah,
back when they do the get that healing light, I think it's called.
I'm surprised how rarely I actually use the Great Sacrifice. I used it early on because as a kind of a cheese way to level up Unica when she had
Mhm.
Micaiah. I was like, oh, I use this ability. If half my party is injured, suddenly Unica gets like a whole level off of one ability. It's kind of
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, I tried to at least use it once every map, just because you get so much SP from it when you use it, and you basically get a level up each time as well.
I wonder if that'll be patched.
I don't know. It is pretty OP.
Anyways, number 4 is in now.
Yep.
My number 4 was Erica, which is another character from a game that I still haven't played.
Mm.
Sacred Stones, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. I quite enjoyed her as she made one of my flyer builds work really well. And she was generally versatile on the offense side of things with a lot of weapon options and a lot of nuke potential.
Oh yeah, the twin attack can do so much damage depending on who you're fighting and what's going on with it. So
Yes, she also had some pretty funny interactions with the person I put her on. Uh, and for the record, I also had some pretty great ones too. But just the nuke potential and just her general character, I ended up really liking.
yeah, she would have definitely made my list if not for the DLC ones too, because she was really effective. And there's going to be a few that are going to they're just going to miss the cut, because just like I had those 2 extra ones and they're both really good. Speaking of, my number 4 is Edelgard, or the 3 house characters, because you get Edelgard, Claude, and Dimitri.
Yes, but Elgard is clearly the best of the 3.
She is the main person, even though I do prefer Claude. Edelgard, I could call her. That's what some people say. But yeah,
Uh,
if you want versatility, this emblem is pretty crazy, because you basically can manipulate the weapon triangle with them, since you have axes, bows, and spears. Because if you level them up enough, you'll get access to all 3. And then their main attack is the 3 houses attack, which uses all 3 weapons. So you're most likely going to break an enemy even with just one of the attacks. And one cool thing about this one too is, if you're next to Byleth, or the person who has Byleth equipped, you get a free action. So you can do your special and you get another attack after that if you're next to Byleth.
that is interesting. That sounds like a variation then of Leaf, because I
Yes,
remember Leaf's core thing is that he also has the weapon matching.
it does. It's pretty much a better version of Leafs, because I honestly did not like Leaf's emblem that much. It was okay, but I just didn't really use him as much as I guess I used this one, which I'll tell you, the character I paired with was basically a god when she got, because even like the main attack, or Claude's bow would just destroy enemies. Like you could one shot monsters with it. And then
Dang.
of course the flyers, like the dragon flyers and all of them, they're dead,
Yeah,
because
but you
it's
could use an iron bow on flyers in this game and they'd die.
that's very true. But yeah, it was definitely a very powerful emblem ring. So you're gonna have fun when the DLC, when you get, because plus we got a couple new ones that I'm sure will add even more to the mix and make it even more interesting.
Yeah. I will say in Leaf's defense that if you pair him with a defensive unit, that reflexive switching he gets is pretty darn nice for defense.
Nice. Yeah, I think I did pair him mostly with Jade, who was the knight I couldn't remember his name
Yeah.
before.
All right. So my last then was Corrin. And Corrin I picked for two reasons. One, because I thought her gameplay mechanic was very interesting in that it was uh, tactically the most like there was no real raw offense or defense on it. Well, I guess
Mm-hmm.
depending on who you paired with, there was some raw defense, but just the fact that you could manipulate terrain with her was a lot of fun.
Yes. And yeah, depending on who you paired it with as well, you could you would get fog for your
Yeah,
units, which was clutch because it did it for more than one square. And yeah, the ice block saved me a few times as well.
yeah. The ability to just like go out into a middle of a field and decide I have cover here enabled a lot of my favorite types of strategies, which is the heavily offensive ones.
Yep.
Yeah. And then her character was hilarious to me because they seem to have really played into her being this kind of nymphy, kind of not sultry, but that kind of like lovey dovey kind of personality,
Yep.
which is really hilarious to me with Fate's more or less being the horniest of the Fire Emblems.
Definitely for sure that.
And all of her ability icons were like covered in hearts or had some sort of like love and bonding kind of
Yeah,
word.
which speaking of her, that healing touch or whatever is such a good ability too to get or skill for people because you just if you wait around other units, you'll just heal a bit of their HP, which is really good too.
It's just that one was the what really the name of that one was just so funny to me.
Well, I'm glad because I did Sigurd is because I had so many emblems that I love, but like I said, since I had the two options, I actually don't have any of the same as you, which is good. So we get to talk about more of them. But not my number five is actually Lucina
Ah,
because Lucina's was pretty clutch for me, and of course, if you grouped up units a lot around each other, you get the attack that it does more. The more damage you do, the more units are with you. It's pretty
yeah,
much all tied to that. But her favorite ability of mine was definitely like the bond guard ability because you could
that
basically
was really useful.
protect four units, kind of like chain guard, but it was better than that because you also could dodge a lot more. And I think I wasn't sure how many attacks it could take, but I think it did more than chain guard.
I don't think it was limited because the chain guard was limited by how much health you had,
Mm-hmm.
whereas hers would uh, stay active. I didn't use it too often though because you had to sacrifice an attack for that, and I usually had her on a crit heavy character because she had a lot of base crit bonuses.
I think we probably had it on the same character, but see, basically, what I would do is I would, because you could put a revive stone, of course, with Tiki on that character, and then bond shield them, and then you pretty much could easily survive any attack, which was
Yeah,
nice.
and I liked how what you said with like the group attacks is that they really in the gameplay made a reference to awakening by having her compatible with those same strategies you have from awakening if you enjoy that sort of thing, where it was about mobbing your units together and just really wrecking whoever you laid
Yep,
eyes on.
yep, the bonding.
Yeah, although it was still not twisted, but like modified to the engage method, where it was about being in range of the enemy, not just being adjacent to your friends, which was fun.
I gotta say, it's pretty hilarious that none of us put Marth on this list.
Uh, he was just so consistent and solid that I was just like, this guy's great. Just barely didn't make a cut.
Yeah, I mean, there's really wasn't any bad emblem rings. I mean, like I said, I really didn't think Leafs was that good, but I also didn't put as much time into his. Roy, I did find a use for, which we'll talk about in our armies, but only really for one specific ability, because otherwise his was pretty bad too.
Yeah, he did have good base stats, though, for certain builds, which is why they were all at least fairly useful
Yeah,
if you had the slots for them. Because by the end of the game, you kind of like, oh, I can't use all these.
I know. And it's also funny because in Roy's actual game, he's kind of weak as well, so it fits it pretty well accurately.
All right. With that, then I guess we can start talking about our final parties. Let's see. I guess back and forth again would probably work best here.
Yeah, so I did like because obviously I think the final 14 are what you choose, right? That's like the
Yeah.
most of the final. So that's I just highlighted my last 14 that I did, and then yeah, I'll talk about the emblem rings I equipped with them.
Yeah. So I put as I'll just start with my main character Lear. I
Yep,
put Marth on them at the end of it.
which
It
makes
was
sense. I mean,
yeah, I called it the classic hero build. It was a sword. It was a hero. Wasn't really min maxed for anything in particular. Just straight up good stats across the line.
yeah. So for me, I put Tiki on the main on Alir because it makes sense. Number one, you're already a dragon, and the ability just it works really well too. Like just to put because he really could be a tank if I wanted him to be. Then plus he could revive. He could put the revival stone on people, and he pretty much could attack anything. And I really didn't have to worry about him dying at all.
And you had the theme of double dragon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought for sure we would turn into a dragon, kind of like Corrin does at some point in the game, but you don't.
I was really hoping we would, but honestly, female Lear had such a cool set of armor and great attack animations that I wasn't really upset about it.
Well, and if you when you play it again, you can always just equip Tiki to her because she can turn into a dragon then.
Nice. My follow up, or my second in command, was Diamant, who was a character I really enjoyed just because he was more or less the straight man of the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
And I paired him with Lucina, and I called it the Big Sword with Crit build.
Ooh, that's interesting. So that isn't who I paired Lucina with, but my next one's going to be I did Ivy, and I paired her with Roy
Oh, that's a
because
weird one.
yes, the only reason I did is because I really couldn't find the emblem ring I wanted to put to her because the two I had been using for her I gave to somebody else. So I chose Roy because you unlock the ability to survive with 1 HP no matter how much damage you get. And Ivy being a flyer is very
Yeah.
susceptible to getting one shot by somebody. So that saved her a couple times. So I'm like, I'll just keep it on. That's really I never really used his abilities, but that keeping 1 HP was clutch for her.
Yeah, that was one thing with Ivy as for me as well, is that she was often in scenarios where I was having to be very careful about her not getting dead.
Yep.
And my third, fittingly, was also a flyer, but it was Chloe, and I paired her with Erica. I called them the ICBM duo because that's what they did. They flew the furthest of anyone. I'm pretty sure I even used boots on her to make her base movement
Ooh.
speed even higher. And they do, I just pick a unit that I wanted dead and send her.
Yep. It's funny because Chloe was also nuke for me. I had a different emblem ring on her, which I'll get to her, but she might be one of the best flyers in Fire Emblem, like stat wise and just
Yeah.
nuke potential, because typically flyers are really weak defensively, but she really didn't have any trouble with any units, which was
Yeah.
great.
When she promoted to a Griffin Knight, her base defense got pretty decent, but even better is her avoid was really
Mhm.
high. So I actually had her as a crit lancer with a killer lance.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense.
Yep.
All right, so my number 3 unit was Lapis, who I had equipped with Lucina. So she was the one I put with Lucina because she had high crits as well. That's why I thought maybe you put Lucina
I
with.
had a slightly different variation of that next, but
But yeah, I've had her with Lucina because she just fit so well with it because she already had the swords. And then when you unlock the bow, it was actually clutch for her because sword, two space sword attacks are kind of rough. Unless
Yeah.
you could use 11 sword, but she really obviously didn't have good magic, and she was only proficient enough in axes to have a hand axe, which didn't really do much damage compared to a tomahawk. So the Parthithia, I think is the name of the bow, was so good for me at times with Lapis as well.
Did you make Lapis a sword master or something else?
I made her actually a hero.
Ah, I made her a sword master.
Yeah, I did make her one at first, but then I'm like, I already have. We already had a what's his name? He's not. He wasn't in my final party, but
Ah,
the other sword master. But I did get another general later on. But I just thought I liked the versatility with axes with her. But yes, she probably would have been a better sword master, like you said.
yeah, she was my fourth party member, and I paired her with Lynn because she was my avoid tank, my like
Ooh, yeah,
heavy, as much crit, as much avoid as I could
mhm.
put. Just send her off into the middle of a field, and she crit anyone who tried to attack her.
Yeah, that's a good combo.
Yeah, because Lynn also gave her the ability to attack twice, no matter whose turn it was. She always went first twice, and she likely crit, so they were dead. And then the clones, and then the extra range, and then the bows. And she was probably the key of the party.
Yeah, she was also my key as well. She was just such a good unit.
Yeah.
So my fourth unit was, I think his name is Seagal the dancer, because I like my,
Seagal.
yeah, I had him. I like the dancers, and I paired him with Corin, which is actually who he came with. But I just love. I usually don't actually start the dancers, but he was a pretty good dancer. I feel like because he also had the martial arts, and he paired so well with Corin that I'm like, well, I'll just keep him in the party because I love that extra turn. And then if you have the one with Byleth, it's like you could or you could dance for the one who had Byleth equipped and dance again. So you could
Yeah.
make so that's what pretty much why I'm like dancing is so powerful, and that's why I'm like I have to have him in the party. All he could do was really dance, and then he would heal people because he had that uh, healing touch ability. So yeah, he was a clutch party member.
It was very useful. I have him lower on my list, but I'll get to that. My fifth end on the lineup was Fram, and that's the one I paired with Byleth. So I called her the Mortars and Band-Aids build.
That's interesting because I did uh, put Byleth with her brother at some point, but I didn't. He didn't make my final party, so I didn't have him as that. But yeah, I could see that. Fram did not make my final party either, but yeah, that would be a good for the healer to have that because mine healer did also have Byleth, but
Yeah, I ended up not doing a whole lot of mages until later in the game. And by then, I made Fram a kind of off mage. She starts as just a healer, and so I promoted her into a priest.
she actually gets like really. Oh, see, I took her down the martial arts path because she gets really good strength growth. Actually, she can take down units. Like I started sending her out at one point because she could do some damage.
Yeah, I probably should have paid more attention to people's growth rates early on because I ended up with a lot of things where I was like, oh, I should not have put this or tried this with this character, like giving Etty a magic bow when she literally had zero magic stat.
That's funny. All right, so yeah, my number five was I don't know if I can say his name right. It's the Prince Frigado from the like he was like the knight with the bow,
Trying to remember
Figaro or
like
something.
Fagado or
Frigado,
Fagardo. I can't remember.
something
But
like that. But yeah, I had him and I paired him with Sigurd. Or
mm,
actually, did I? No, I don't. I gotta think now. I think yeah, I did pair him with Sigurd because it's funny because I did like you mentioned put him with Lewis as well, but with him as the bow knight, I could get so much range and I could move out of the way once
yeah,
I like would do attacks. So he was pretty much like a nuke at the end too because he also I gave him the ability to always vantage. So he would usually get two attacks and I gave him the radiant bow and he would pretty much take everything out and then he could cover the whole map. He was so good.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I never ended up using any bow art, like mounted archers, which is like a first for me.
Interesting.
Yeah. My next then was Anna. And she is one of the builds I probably shouldn't have done, but did anyways. She and Ike were my tank and executioner.
That is so funny because she's like the smallest character in the game too, with like the biggest Ike.
Yeah, and I promoted her into the. It wasn't general. It was there was two things you could go from.
Oh, Berserker.
There was Berserker, and then the other one. I picked the other one that had the like swords or lances available
Hmm.
because I wanted that extra defense.
It might have been general then or hero. I don't. It could be. I don't. Can't think of
Maybe have been
anything else.
Hero. Anyways, she ended up being kind of my tank of the party, which I didn't have a lot of. And by the end, I was kind of going, this was probably not the best character I could have turned into a tank, but she's adorable.
I was going to ask how her growth was because I admittedly kind of abandoned her early on and didn't use her that much.
Yeah, she had pretty good damage scaling, but and I gave her a ton of health. She ended up with 70 plus hit points by the end.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But her general just defense and resistance weren't quite high enough for the role I was trying to fit her into. But she was still, again, really adorable. So I just let her do her thing.
Right. Yeah, I'll have to look. I'll have to try to use her more next time. So my next unit was one of my favorite, probably my favorite mage in the game, and that is Citrine. And I put her with Celica because obviously she's another mage, and you get Warp Ragnarok, which is great for her. And her
Yep.
magic stats are so high that she was
Oh,
pretty much just nuking. I mean, of course, armored units could not even take her down at all. I should have gave her more health because there was a lot of times she could have nuked pretty much everybody, but her if she took the hit back, it would kill her because she did have low health, but Warp
yeah.
Ragnarok lets her do that, and then plus you have the double cast with the Celica, and then if you give her the right spell books, her magic stats are just so high. She was a nuke. She wasn't Lysithia level nuke, but she was really good.
I did Citrine dirty and never used her after like the initial level where you get her.
Oh,
Again, I just, for whatever reason, slept on mages until the end. My next pick was Ivy and Celica, and I called them the orbital laser.
yeah, I did have that was a good matchup too because she has some nuke options, and you give her the spell book that was it Sephora or whatever have where you like double cast dark magic, and she's the one who actually kicked off my attack on the final boss at the end because she took down a general by herself.
Yeah. Yeah, she had that trait for her character itself, I think, or was that? Yeah, I think that was Ivy's trait, was the dark grasp or whatever.
She had wrath too, I thought, which would pretty much like if she focused on an enemy, like she would like do all her attacks first or something like that.
Yeah, I gave her Thorin, an upgraded Thorin, so she was literally just running around and doing a extended range laser at everyone.
Yeah, she was a good unit. So my next one was John, who I think of as the Donald of this game. The typical you get the unit and he's pretty pathetic at first, but if
Yeah,
you put your growth into him, he ends up being really good. And I kept him as a martial artist, but I paired him with Micaiah because the healing abilities he already had those, and it gave him shine, which was good because he really didn't have any magic spells. But he just ended up working up really well with Micaiah, so I just ended up keeping. I figured the healer with John's growth would work really well with that because he could get the extra level ups each map too.
yeah. I immediately realized that he was the Donald of the group, and then
Yep.
immediately went, not this time. I've had enough trying to train you guys.
He actually was pretty good. The healers are easy to train up, which is one nice thing.
That is true. It was definitely much easier than trying to get that spearman and awakening. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Ugh.
I wasn't good enough for that kind of thing then. Mozu was pretty easy in Fates though.
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah, Donald was definitely he was because he was just like a normal spear user. I don't know if you could even give him a javelin. You might have had to use a stick for a while or something. I'm just like, this
Oh
is
yeah.
terrible.
He was so bad at the start. I
But
was
man,
like, I
once you
don't care what the promise is. This is not worth it.
well, if you build him into like a hero or a berserker, he's like the best unit in the game.
That's such a funny thing to do. I very much respect it. My next one after that then was Tamara and Sigurd, the fastest tank in the West. This was a build I kind of slept on until later because Tamara was like one of those floating units where depending on how many I could actually bring into the mission, I'd bring her or not. But slowly over time, I realized she had that ability that gave her basically another crit. Did you ever use her much?
No, I mean, I did use her, but I mostly like she came paired with Ike, so I would pair her with that, which I didn't really think they were a great match, but she could tank. She did tank for me a lot, but no, I didn't know she had that ability. I used her some, but definitely not as often as I should have, it sounds like.
Yeah, she had the highest damage potential on the whole team, and even without Ike, but I guess Sigurd did help a little bit. She had really good defensive stats where I could just send her in solo into something and usually be pretty confident she'd survive. And then on like a 25% chance, and this was on top of the normal crit. She had like some sandstorm ability or whatever. I don't remember
Oh,
what it's called, but it triggered pretty often, especially when you got the associated stat higher. She just do 120 damage to someone. Just like what?
whoa. Yeah, I need to definitely use her more next time then.
Yeah, so I paired her with Sigurd so she could go anywhere on the map she wanted to and just help whoever she needed to. She wasn't like the star of the party, but she was the backbone by the end of it.
And speaking of one of the stars of the party, Chloe is up next for me, and I gave her Edelgard's emblem, which you can imagine giving her the ability to attack with four different weapons. Or well, I guess that would be it would be three because she already had lances, but she had lances, axes, and a bow. Which a Pegasus Knight with deadly bows, she would take out bosses in one turn for the most part for me. Like she
Yeah.
would, and I would always make sure that she would get danced and go again because even her biggest attack, which was the three houses, wasn't as good as Claude's bow, which could basically do 70 damage. It was just she was so good. She and I like I said before, I never saw a Pegasus Knight that could stand up to just regular attacks so much because usually they're very fragile.
Yeah, like in Blazing Blade when you get that first Pegasus Knight. I was like, oh, I love your mobility, but you are as fragile as the slim spear that you are holding.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, because usually you just want to send Pegasus Knights out to fight mages and then maybe even other Pegasus Knights. But if they go up against like Dragon Riders, they're in trouble. But she had no problems because she had that bow ability, and she was even with just a javelin, she could pretty much take people out. She would always go
Yep.
twice and would do like 19 or 20 damage every time. So
She was insane. I loved her. Yeah. My next one then was Etty, and I paired her with Corin for the smoke screen, and I called them the Gears of War sniper.
that's a good one. Cause see, a lot of one I did a lot with Yunaka with Corin as well because she did the smoke screen. So that smoke screen's just so good.
Yeah, it was one of the first times that I had the one bow person on the party, which I felt like bows, maybe the horse archers were really good, but the snipers didn't feel quite as strong as they were in, say, Three Houses. But the funny part is, I built her as a tank, and she had over 60 health by the end of the game.
Whoa.
Yes, so she gave everyone high avoid, and just herself could just tank things if she needed to, which was a really weird position to put an archer in.
Yeah.
But I did it anyways.
Yeah, that would have been crazy. All right, and then my next one is Diamant, which I talked about before. I put him with Ike because they actually like originally they pair you with Roy with Diamant, but Ike actually works good. Diamant's defense needs a little work, but his resistance is pretty bad. But with Ike, it does help him a lot. And there was only a few times where he could not handle all the damage put at him, but most of the time he could handle being a tank pretty well.
Yeah, and that he has a high build stat. I found being one of his main advantages later in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So he's easy to give the heavy, big, powerful weapons. And I imagine on Ike, that means he's actually able to get like 2 attacks with a lot of those really big ones.
Yep. Yeah, because he had that one sword that I don't know if only he could use it, but that you got a sword in the game that you could only attack second with it. I don't know if you remember that
The
or not.
blades.
Yeah, the blade.
That was just a category of weapon.
Okay, yeah, because I remember I got it. I thought from a chapter mission, but
Lapis was actually the first one in the game to have it.
oh, and yeah, no, not like the iron blade. It was like a specialty weapon. Like it had,
Oh,
I don't remember what it had, like a name and everything, but it also had. It was the same type of thing though, like you said, as the blades. Like you can only go second, but this one
yeah.
wasn't a heavy one. It didn't push you away, which we didn't even talk about that. But that was also could be a clutch thing. It ended up hurting me more than helping because enemies would push you away and then get to attack you again, and I'm just like, ah.
Yeah, I never used the push a whole lot.
I didn't either.
Yeah. Well, the next one on my list is Seedal, and I didn't actually have him paired with anyone. He was just doing his thing as a dancer healer.
Yeah, which really is enough because that dancing is just so powerful.
And the extra healing utility is very, very useful.
Yep. Near the end, I like to have, I guess, well, there was more people that could heal, like Chloe could heal and Citrine could heal, but mostly just John and, uh, who was my other healer? Oh, I didn't talk about her yet, but she's coming up. Were my main healers, so.
Yeah, he had a pretty funny personality too, but that's pretty much it for him,
Yep.
for me.
And then my next one was Lewis, who I did pair a lot with Sigurd, but at the end, of course, I gave Sigurd to somebody else. So I actually paired him with Leaf because really he's a great knight. I actually liked him more than Jade because Jade more specializes in axes, where Lewis will specialize in lances. But I just felt like his defense was better, and
It was so high.
and he could just like there was one map, I think it was 19 or 20, where he pretty much saved me. He took like 10 attacks at once and he somehow survived. He had an elixir at the end with like 3 health and he managed to survive, but he really didn't need any emblems, so I just gave him Leaf so that he could like kind of what you said before, Leaf could do the break the weapon triangle because he had like that 4
Yeah, the
attack.
reactive.
Yeah, so he was a good pair with that, but yeah, Lewis was a great knight.
Yeah, and that just further speaks to how much I had more or less abandoned the defense gameplay because I did not have Lewis on my team after like mission 10.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, funnily enough, my next one is also my Leaf pairing. I did Alfred plus Leaf. And at this point in my list, we're getting to the ones where I just went, okay, I'll do you as well. Why not?
Yeah.
I just called them the backup damage because that's what they did. If I couldn't do just enough damage in an area, I'd send Alfred over there and they'd do their little thing to finish it off.
Yeah, Alfred, I just didn't really like him as much. Like I thought it's funny because I really didn't have many mounted units. I really only had Figaro or whatever his name was that we can't remember, but I just didn't think his growth rates were that good for me. Like his damage output, his mobility was good, obviously, but I just didn't find I mean, I used him, but I pretty much abandoned him pretty quickly.
Yeah, he just kind of did everything all right, but not quite all right enough to shine on his own. But I did keep him in the party mostly because I kind of liked having all the main characters in my party just for the first playthrough, just as a kind of,
Right.
I don't know, idiosyncrasy.
It does make sense because yeah, I only had Diamant. Well, and then my next character was also a Lord, which was Alcrest, who was Diamant's younger brother. I think that's his name, right?
Something like that. I didn't use him after like the second mission with him.
See, I love that the missions that brought him and Lapis and Citrine. Those were like three of my main users because I love a sniper. He was a good sniper. I liked him more than Etier. Like you said, you used Etier. I don't know who's has the better growth, but I paired him with Lin, which made him the ultimate archer because once again he had double vantage, so he always would
Yeah.
go first. And he was already good with bows, so his damage output was just crazy. His crits, he would just go off. I just felt him, and he had enough, and it gave him the since Lin gave you that avoidance, it gave him the speed to be able to avoid a lot of attacks because he tanks some for me, which archers almost never do.
Yeah, and the clones adding to that since they.
Yeah,
The funny part about those clones really was the fact that they had one hit point, even
I
though their
know.
avoid was high. So enemies would prioritize them because their logic says, that's an enemy I can kill in one hit. Therefore, I will attack that.
It's always funny because a lot of times the main enemy attacks would miss, but the stupid chain attacks would always hit, which would instantly kill the clone. So,
Yeah. If you positioned well enough, though, they wouldn't be
yep.
able to get the chain attacks because they're all scattered to come get you. So then my next is Vale and Micaiah, and I feel like you don't really get a whole lot of time with Vale, so she didn't really get developed into the party as the rest of them. But I tried making her into a crit mage plus my emergency heal button as the only other dragon in the party who did not have to be on the front lines like Elier was.
Yeah, that's funny because I really did not use her at all. I'm like, I know the game wants me to use her. I'm just like, I pretty much have who I want to use already. It was the same with that other hound that joined too. I used him for a little bit because he was handy because he could heal, which was nice for a riding unit. But I'm just like, I pretty much already have my people. Sorry.
Yeah, I kind of ran out of people that I had trained up to the right level at that point since I was mostly just focusing on 12. So when I needed a 13th and 14th, I was like, I don't have a 13th and 14th. So I just took in Vale and Mavier.
Yeah, and see, this kind of makes sense too because I usually have a grudge against pre-promoted units when you get them because I'm just like,
Yes.
well, I didn't grow them myself, and that's why most of my party consists of units that weren't pre-promoted. I think there is two maybe that I have that were pre-promoted. There are, well, I guess the dancer as well, but other than that, all the rest of my party was not pre-promoted. There is one exception that I normally would have put in, but she kind of conflicted with another character that I liked a little more, so I just didn't put her in my main party.
Yeah, and being series veterans, that prejudice against pre-promotion is kind of justified, since
Hmm.
the pre-promoted ones would usually steal all your experience if you used them too much early, and then you found out that being pre-promoted, they weren't actually getting the full 20 levels before the promotion, so they were actually behind the curve of their naturally promoted peers.
Yeah, sorry, Vander. I ditched you as soon as I could.
Same. I'm sorry, you're a cool character, but you were the paladin.
Yep,
It's
exactly.
always the starting paladin.
The only now that the Path of Radiance, which you just played, kind of has an exception to that because the paladin you get in that game actually isn't a bad unit compared to most other paladins.
No, yeah, she was good. Can't remember her name right
Yeah,
now,
I don't
but
remember either, but
she also kind of fell off for me
yeah.
by the end of it, but it was still useful enough.
All right, my next unit, I did not really like this character at all, but she was a good unit because she was a flyer and a mage. It's Hortensia, and
Oh, yeah.
I paired her with Byleth because you get that extra movement range, and she could easily swoop in and dance and then get out. I pretty much only used her for that and emergency heals, but as a character, I found her voice acting kind of annoying, and I really did not like
Same.
her. So I did use her in the party, but reluctantly, I guess, in that regard.
I got her in the party and then went, You annoy me. You are the bottom of the list now. Never used her again.
Yeah, she wasn't a bad unit, but her magic stats aren't. She isn't pre-promoted. She's like level 18 or 19 when she joins. But I mean, as a backup healer and as primarily a dancer, she was fine for that.
Yeah. My next one was really technically more of my 12th instead of my 13th, but I had Unica and Roy, and I called them the Knives Out build. she was kind of a funny unit for me because she kept going in and out of my main party as the missions were going. And so her final level wasn't as high as everyone else because of that.
Right.
So I feel like she could have been a much stronger unit, but as it was, she just kind of filled out a good utility role. And then Roy giving her that extra bit of damage to pad out the fact that she had missed out on some growth kind of helped her stay relevant enough for that final mission.
Yeah, I used her a lot too, but I mainly paired her with Corin, like I said, because that gave her even more avoidance, so she could not be hit really
Yeah.
at all. But I had to, I just, she would have made the cut if not for I wanted the dancer instead because of the dancing is just so powerful. But all right, my next one is Marin, one of my pre-promoted units that I did put in the party. She is the Wolf Rider. I don't remember what her
Yeah.
class called, but
I think that's it. Just Wolf Rider, I
yeah,
think.
Wolf Rider. She basically surpassed Unica like for damage because she used the same type of weapons, the daggers, and I gave her 11 sword too, which she was really good at using. But giving her, I usually kept silver dagger and 11 sword, and then I paired her with Erica. So you can imagine she got the avoidance and the speed and damage output that
Oh
just
yeah.
made her a nuke. So she was, and she had the mobility too.
She was a unit I told myself I was going to use early on, and then she just kind of didn't quite fit in with my early team, and then by the time I had space for her again, she was too far behind.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Who's your final unit that made the cut?
Mavier. Just him. He was a mobile flame spear, and that was pretty much it.
That's exactly what I put on him too, and I gave him healing because I'll be like, well, if you need to heal somebody, you can do something. So, but
Yeah, that was it.
my last one was I don't remember his name. It's the mage that loves to howl and party. Do you remember
Oh
what?
yeah, that guy, the guy who came with Fagato.
Yeah, he was a pretty good mage actually. I mainly used him as a healer. It's funny because at this point I had no other emblem rings to give out, so I gave him Marth, which really did not fit with what he wanted to do.
That
But
is a very odd pairing.
it's he was so good at healing, and he came with some good staffs, which I could have gave to somebody else. But I see I must like the mages because I guess I only had two in my party, but that's still two more than you had, right? Because did you have any mages?
I
Oh, I
had
guess
Ivy,
Ivy. So I had
Ivy
three.
and Fram.
Yes, I had three mages then.
Oh yeah, technically I had Veil as well,
Well, that's true.
but there weren't a whole lot of uh, mage emblems, so
Yeah.
they kind of did get starved a little bit for there.
I also did really like Gold Mary. I liked her even though she was pre-promoted as well, but I just found that Lapis was better because I had them both as the same class. So
Yeah,
the only thing that I liked, I did like that it differentiates because it gave Gold Mary a use of spears, where Lapis could only do axes instead.
yeah, that was interesting that they had the variants of a lot of those, uh, you know, not dual classes, but like kind of
Yeah.
hybrid classes, weapon classes.
Yep.
You could pick the spear variant or the axe variant, which was nice.
All right. I think we're ready for the main event.
All right, it's time for top five waifus, and I will let you start.
Are we gonna go from 5 to 1, or how do we want to do this?
Yeah, let's go 5 to 1.
All right, so this was a tough list because there's a lot of characters I liked, but I tried to balance how much I like their supports with how much I also like their gameplay and use in battle. So my number 5 is actually Yunaka, who we just talked about, because she's a great character. She has hilarious dialogue, zappy, and she just says random things. She's really strong early on, kind of like what Connor and I said. She fades out a little bit as the thief, but like I said, she would have made my final party if not for the dancer. But I really liked using her, and she was the first character where I'm like, okay, I really like this character that joined the party because early on I was kind of like, eh, but she was great. So
I like the dynamic of her being this trying to fake that really happy-go-lucky. Oh, look at me! I'm saying random stuff, and then actually, she's trying to distract everyone from the fact that she was an assassin.
Yep.
And so occasionally she says those really like dark, menacing lines.
Yeah.
I was like, that was really fun. My number 5 was Colgate Chan,
Oh.
better known as female Alir.
You see, I had male Alir, so he did not qualify for this list, but I could imagine her being pretty funny because the reactions to stuff I've seen already. So,
Yes, she she gets the benefit of having bonding scenes with, or no, whatever they call them, the bond scenes with everyone in the party. So there's a wide variety of character moments to choose from. But for me, the strength of it was one, I loved her attack animations so much, which is probably not too different from the male one. But then paired with, I just really, really, really liked her visual design. And then the story elements near the end got pretty good too, in terms of like the actual core narrative. She had the most cheesy dialogue of anyone in the rest of the game,
right.
but the end kind of made up for me a lot.
Nice. So my number 4 was actually another early on character, and it's one that we both love to use, and it's Chloe, which is funny because
Mhm.
Chloe, like her big support stick is she loves fairy tales. Like that's always what she wants to talk about, and she's like obsessed with fairy tales. So I didn't really like her character that much, but in battle, she was one of the best units, which we talked about. So I liked her enough, and she was so good in battle that I had to give her this slot because I don't usually like Pegasus Knights, but she might be my favorite one in the series so far.
She's probably one of the strongest, that's for sure. My number 4 was Etty, because I found her character hilarious. Not only was the design kind of fun, but then the complete conflict with her personality of being essentially a gym bro.
Yeah, she was hilarious. It was so funny too that she wore a tiara the whole time. I'm just like, why do you have this on? It's so weird.
Yeah, everyone just had those really like kind of generic, not generic, but like archetypal fantasy to the extreme kind of outfits. And I really liked it because they kind of leaned more into sort of the French slash German fairy tales rather than just like the British kind of iterations. So I thought that was a nice little twist.
Yep.
Well, not really a twist, but variation.
I also got to shout out Lewis, who is not a waifu, but some of his support con or dialogues are hilarious. Like his one with Chloe's just like Chloe's like, "Why were you staring at all of us this whole time?"
Oh
And he's
yeah, they
just
had a funny pairing.
And he's just like, well, like you guys all look so artistic. Like everybody would think he's a perv, but he's just like, oh no, I was staring at all you because I. And he like talks about it in such a refined way that it gets him completely out of the reason for staring, which is hilarious.
Yeah, the two people watchers then doing their
Yeah,
people watching thing. But yeah,
yeah,
Etty, that conflict between looking like a little princess but then acting like a gym bro, and that was funny to me.
nice. So my number 3 was Citrine, who you ignored as you stated, but her support conversations are pretty funny, especially with Alir because she tries to give him or her like presents for helping out, and she's really rich and from a rich family, so she doesn't really know how to like relate to anybody, so she's like, I'll just give you an island or something if that's okay, and they're like, no, that's way too much. And it actually has like a pretty good payoff at the end because you end up hearing that she's like this because her friend, I can't remember if her friend gave her something or she tried to give somebody something before, and they basically dismissed it and just said it's terrible or something. It was flowers, I think, because at the end she gives Alir flowers and he's like, well, this is perfect. Or and then she's like, well, it happened before, and her friend just said that this is a waste of time. You need to spend more money. So that's why she thinks you have to spend more to give people things. And she's just an amazing mage that I used all the time. So
It is a nice little character arc. Yeah. My number 3, for the 4th time today, we're talking about her, Chloe.
yeah, almost the same.
Incredible gameplay unit. Loved your visual design. And yeah, we've pretty much said everything that needs to be said about her.
All right, my number one and number two were tight here, and it's funny because my number, like, I feel like my number two is more on the character more than the actual gameplay usage because it's Gold Mary. Gold Mary is my number two because her character was hilarious. Like, she is very stuck up, and she's like she's really good at cooking, and she knows that everybody thinks she's beautiful and everybody's like jealous of her, so she like flaunts it and uses it to her advantage all the time. And then she tries to use it against the Lear too, and at first he's just like, I don't really get this, like, what's wrong with you? And she's like, I just, like, everybody thinks I'm so beautiful when I cry, or something like that. She's just such an extreme character that I loved her for that. And she's, like I said, she's a pre-promoted hero on the battlefield, and she was fine. I would pair her with Erica at times, but compared to my number one unit and as the character overall, I just didn't like her quite as much. But that's probably who I'm going to choose next time, because we'll have to talk about this after our number ones. But if we didn't really talk about the Alir bond emblem, because that can be pretty clutch if you do it with an S rank or A rank character. So
Oh yeah, that I forgot about that actually, but that was pretty darn effective. Just as another point to what you were saying, there is no lack of extreme characters in this game, and that's half the fun of it.
mm-hmm.
Anyways, my number two was Ivy, who
Ooh.
was a character that I initially didn't think I would like very much, because the first thought I had was, wow, you're a little too goofy looking with that outfit.
The hat.
And that's coming from the guy who immediately latched on to Colgate-chan.
Yeah. That's funny because Ivy was my number 6. She just missed my cut because I really liked her too. She's a great unit, and her supports are pretty funny, especially with Alir.
Yeah. I ended up really liking her character, and the way she's one of the first, I think, really strong characters in the story, and her involvement. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say really strong, because there isn't a whole lot of really strong characters until
Yeah.
like the end of the game. But she had some of the more interesting character development in the game uh, early on, and
Nice.
her design grew on me too, which is hilarious because I literally like, okay, her name is Ivy. Put a trellis over her face and give her actual thorns on her hands for her outfit. And someone thought that would work.
Yeah, the character designers definitely had fun in this game.
And the thing is, by the end of the game, it worked. I was all on board. It's like, yeah, let's go. Ivy is literally purple Ivy.
Yep. All right, we're ready for our number ones.
Oh boy.
And I think we might have the same number ones actually,
We might.
because my number one is Hortensia. No, just kidding. I already said we can't stand her. So, but no, my actual number one and the best waifu in the game, in my opinion, is Lapis.
Correct. We are in full agreement.
We agree. So now this means in the Discord now we cannot have any Lapis disparagement here, any disgust or anything going on with her. But anyway, yes,
No talking
Lapis.
bad about Lapis.
Basically, yes. So yeah, Lapis. We already talked about how great a unit she is. She gets those crits. We paired her with different emblems, and they were both. She both was like the heart of our party. It sounded
Yep.
like, and her supports are great because she's like a country girl that is like very low class, and her supports with Alir are really good because they're just like she's teaching him or her to do these different things, and then she's really trying to hide where she grew up in her tater farm,
Yeah.
which is pretty funny. But she's such a good character. I really liked her. I had a feeling she was going to be your number one, and for good reason, because she is the best.
Yeah, she's like simultaneously both as extreme as the rest of the cast, but also somewhat grounded in a fun way. And as someone who grew up kind of like that half rural, half city, I can really relate with her, like, not necessarily her desire to hide it, but that dichotomy of, oh, I'm now among royalty and doing that thing. But I grew up kind of living out in the country. And I love the fact that fighting bears is kind
Oh
of
yeah,
one of her main things.
yeah. Because there's a bunch of characters. They're like, well, we got to fight bears. Or it's like, well, I know how to fight bears. You just got to do this. It's like,
There's so much talking about fighting bears in the game. You never actually fight a bear is the best part.
and yeah, I waited. I mostly didn't use the Engage until I was with Lapis because it just makes it so strong. Like you basically engage both units and they get such strong attacks. And then if you do a team up attack, I'm pretty sure one of them wiped out the final boss's 100 HP with just if you're beside each other and do the super attack, it's so strong.
Yep. I had a layer paired with Diamond, and so the two of them was just like, all right, that's a instant kill anything if you do it move. But yeah, and then the other thing about Lapis was her engineering side, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
So many of her bond scenes were her strapping together some invention to help another character with something. And I love that when she revealed the name of it, there was always like a Mark II or a Mark III on the top.
Oh yeah, that was great. So you know what this means now? We're gonna have to find us a Lapis emote somewhere.
Yes, as the heads of the Discord community, it has been decreed for everyone else that Lapis is the waifu of the game, and thus she deserves an emote.
Yes, correct. We were the judges and the jury on this one. So, all right. Well, we talked about Fire Emblem Engage a lot longer than I expected. Pretty much double the length that we expected, but it's that good.
Yeah, this is already the longest episode we've recorded for all of it, and I don't know how much is even going to get trimmed down.
I know. Even with just two of us, I'm like, oh, with just two people, it's going to be a lot shorter. Nope.
Yeah. We didn't even get to everything I technically wanted to talk about, but we got all the important stuff.
And I know it's early yet, but would this be your GOTY contender if you had to choose right now? It definitely is for me, but I really haven't played too much new stuff yet. So
I would be surprised if it's at least not the top three, but we do have Final Fantasy 16 coming out, and I have a soft spot for that series. So we'll see. But it's very likely.
we will see at the end of the year.
All right, then. We've held any of you listeners hostage long enough, so we will part here. See ya.
Sayonara.